everyone. Mrs. Cuber here.
Hey, Miss Earnhardt.
And we are putting together a little video about MTSS. So we wanted to inform everyone about some of the processes and procedures that we have with MTSS. So we're going to have a few different parts to this. The first part that we're going to do today is about collecting or retrieving your MTSS folders. A lot of you will already know this information, but we're just going to go through it step by step just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So at the beginning of the school year, what happens is teachers will go into our records room, and there will be two different drawers that have MTSS folders. There is a little badge or sticker on the outside that says MTSS folders. Now the top drawer has kindergarten and first grade folders. The bottom drawer has second and third grade folders. So you as a teacher will go into whichever grade level you teach and look in there and see which students from your classroom have MTSS folders. Then you are more than welcome to take those out, please do. They will have name tags on the top, so please look for their name. Take those out. We do ask and strongly recommend that you sign out each folder that you take, just because it's really important that we know where these are and that we keep up with them. So please do sign those out when you take those. And so then you are welcome to keep those folders in your classroom throughout the school year. Just please always know where they are. You do not have to bring them back and forth to the records room. You're welcome to hold on to it. Just keep it in a secure and confidential place as you're working on it throughout the school year.
So you also may get a new student, specifically maybe after Christmas, that enrolls, and they may have an MTSS folder as well. So anytime you have a new student who is enrolled, Ms. Barb would typically tell you that there's an MTSS folder, but it's also a great practice to ask about that as well, because it's not just at the beginning of the year. It could be any students who enroll and come to our school. So when you do retrieve those folders, you do need to take some time, especially at the beginning of the year. You're going to have a little bit more. Typically, a class could have anywhere from 2 MTSS folders to 12 or 13. It just depends on the cohort. So you do need to take some time and go through the folders. And again, if you have a new student who enrolls, take some time and go through there. So for example, when you open it up, you should see the checklist over here on the left and the actual working documents of the interventions on the right. We are going to go in depth on some of these later on, but just to go through, you just want to make sure that there is a checklist, and if they're coming from MGSD, they're going to have something similar to our schools, but if they're coming from out of state or out of district, it may look a little bit different. But just like we've talked about before, the general demographics of the child is going to have some pretty cool information about just their ethnicity, so you know, hey, do I need to speak with Miss Adrienne Alabed, or is there something that I might need to ask Barb about? There's going to be a letter just letting you know when the parents have been notified, or maybe when a conference was held. This paper right here is pretty important because it's also going to tell you the history of the MTSS with this student. Is this their first year that they have been in the MTSS process, or have there been multiple, so you can track the timeline and see what area that they have been receiving some services. So this is just a nice sheet to look at. You're also going to have the Tier 1 paperwork, and again, for your students, this may look the same just because this is your core. So there could be one, if this was a child for reading, this could just be for reading. But if you have students who have needs in math or writing or behavior, then there's going to be one of these Tier 1 for that specific child as well. Then you should also have some of these. These are forms noting and indicating whether the hearing and vision has been completed and passed. That's also going to be on that front checklist. So go through there, because as we have heard and discussed with our resource team, it's very difficult to go through with testing if we do not have hearing and vision checked, because lots of times that is the problem. Here we have the attendance summary. It's going to be very important to know if your child is here, because if they're not here, then they're not learning. So if that is an issue, then we can take care of that. through the MTS process. And the other thing that's really important when you get a new child is looking at this. This is the social developmental history. Whether the child again comes from out of state or out of district or within our school. This is really interesting to know because if the child was born with a, born prematurely, then maybe there is some developmental issues there for a good reason. Or if there's something going on with the home. Lots of times we can unpack this document and find some really important information. That information stays on the left side, and then again on the right, this is our working document piece. If we have, like this specific child has a reading intervention, they are a tier 2. Their intervention is over here on the right side. I need to open it up and I need to review it. And down here on the bottom, it's going to say whether this intervention is working, whether you need to continue it. This specific child has been working on nonsense words, so talking about blending with this CVC blending board. This is something that I need to continue to do this year until I can tell with multiple data points that the child is proficient. I will continue doing this. If I need to change the intervention, then I will meet with them with the group. But right now it does appear that this is what they were doing at the end of the year and it is working. So I need to continue this until my data points can prove that the child is doing fine. If you have any questions about any of the paperwork that you get from a folder, whether you don't understand it or you want to just make sure and confirm, you can at any time ask the 2 of us, or you can also see your MTSS rep from your team. We always have 2 of those. One serves on the leadership team and the other serves on our problem solving team.
Can I just mention also that when these students, when they're in tier 2 and you're talking about these tier 2 students in your PLCs, your grade level meetings, as you talk about those students, it is nice to have signatures down at the bottom just to say that you've talked about that student and to put a date as well. I know there's not a lot of room down here to sign, so if you need to, you're always welcome to sign on the back as well. But it is nice to have those signatures and the dates, especially if a student continues to struggle and goes to tier 3, if they do end up going on to be tested to see if they might receive services for EC, then it is good documentation to have those signatures and dates as well.
Awesome. That just wraps up our first segment. So this is just what to do at the beginning of the year or when you get a child that's new to your classroom. Just check and make sure that you have all the information you need for MTSS. Thanks. Welcome back. We are here, Tracy Kubert and myself are here for part 2 of our MTSS video. Part 2 is going to be about creating an MTSS folder. So we have a few things that we're going to go through. This one is a little bit more lengthy than our part 1 because we're going to go through every single paper that you need to create an MTSS folder for one of your students. First off, we're going to talk about some red flags. Like, how do you know you need to create and start an MTSS folder? So an MTSS folder could be in several different content areas. It could be in reading, and with that it could be comprehension, it could be phonemic awareness, it could be in writing, you could have math, you could have behavior. So lots of different elements and reasons why you can start an MTSS folder. For the majority of the time, it is either one of the core content areas. So typically we do see them mainly in reading and math, but just make sure that you know that you can have them in different areas as well. For example, in reading, one way that is very important that you can definitely utilize at the beginning of the year is your MTSS or your MClass class summary. So after you finish assessing, you have this wonderful data that you can analyze and look at some trends. So that is the big word. You want to make sure that this wasn't just one fluke, because as you know, we don't want to necessarily make a huge adjustment for the child or change their instruction based on one component of one test. So when you're looking at this, we do stress that you analyze the data. Is it something that you saw last year, or is it through a lot of the components in DIBELS perhaps? So for example, if you see in DIBELS, which is the phonemic part of our MClass reading assessment, that there is a lot of yellows and reds, and you look back at last year's data and you see that again there were lots of yellows and reds, and you've been to the records room and there's not an MTSS folder, perhaps you've even spoken to the child's teacher last year and they had some concerns, but the child was able to show some growth. So one just wasn't made. This would be the time that you do need to look a little bit deeper and find out where you need to start looking at maybe phonemic awareness, where you work on blends and sounding out the words, or it could be in math where you're working on number sense. So you want to make sure that you're really digging to find that particular area that you want to highlight and work on. So once you do that, Miss Hubert's going to go and we're going to go through some of the paperwork. But there are lots of things that you can look at. We do have that STAR math assessment at the beginning of the year that we took, and we're going to take these tests 3 times a year. So reading and math, we're going to have these benchmarks. So if you have some target areas that you see some red flags in, and that you have seen this trend throughout this year or last year, that would be a great idea to maybe target that area for an MTSS folder.
Great, thank you. So if you have a student that you are seeing these trends or concerns about and they don't have a folder already, you can find the empty folders with the blank, well, they're not empty, they have paperwork in them, but you can find folders in your workrooms down each of your hallways. There will be a notebook that says MTSS for your grade level, and then also there will be some red folders with all of the paperwork in it that you can fill out. So you will have those in your workrooms. So if you do need to grab one for a student, go ahead and do that. And then like Mrs. Earnhardt said, we are going to kind of walk you through each step of that. I think that this checklist here in the front is very helpful because it tells you exactly step by step what you need to do or what you need to have in there. So we're going to start with that, and you will just pull out that checklist right there, and it has a place for the student's name and then your name and then the school year. So you're going to make sure that that's filled out. And then, as Mrs. Earnhardt said, I believe in part 1 of our video, on the left side of the folder is where you're going to have more things like vision, hearing, the social developmental forms, and then over on the right side of the folder will be more of your tiered paperwork where your progress monitoring and showing information about the intervention. So that will be more on the right side of the notebook. So excuse me, so on the left side of the folder, the first part here on the checklist says student demographic. Excuse me, that is something that can be printed out from PowerSchool. Also, Mrs. Evernham can print that out for you as well if you just shoot her an email. We have some little stickies here to help remember that. So it says Barb can help. So Barb can help with that if you need help printing that out.
And it's multiple pages, so if you do it yourself, you just need to print page 1.
Thank you. And then the next part there is the parent notification letter, and that has the student's name, and then a place for you to put the parent or guardian's name, and then the date. And then this just tells the parent that you're starting this process. Now, just recently we have modified and changed this a little bit, so we will go through to the workrooms and take out the one that's in there now and put this new one in. The big difference with this one is that it lists, it has a place where you list the area of concern and then any interventions that you're doing, so you can communicate that with the parents.
And if you already have sent this out, because many of you did this during your first quarter parent conference report card time, you don't need to send another one. This is just an updated from here on out. But this is probably one of the most important pieces of the MTSS process, is bringing in the parents or calling the parents and letting them know what you are seeing as a concern, because they probably are seeing something similar to it at home. And then this is your opportunity to let them know, I am working on this skill this many times a week, or this person is working on them this many times a week, just to have that open line of communication.
We do have a little example here as well, and it does say that the goal here is to have 58 nonsense words at the end of the year, and then the intervention is blending board cards 3 times a week. So that gets specific about the intervention that's being done. It does have a place for you to list the school's number or your contact information so the parent can contact you. They, I'm sure, already would know how to contact you, but that's on there as well. And then a place for you to sign as well. And then it does ask for the parent's signature, for the parent to sign that and date it and return it to you. And then this will be good documentation for you to keep in your folder that you've discussed the process with the parent or that you've sent home information about it. There is this form as well that is from DPI, Department of Public Instruction, that talks about what MTSS is. It's some pretty good information there. So that can also be helpful to send home to a parent. Okay. Next up, let's see here. Did we get the history form? Oh, we'll come back to this one. This is an important form. Mrs. Earnhardt talked about this in our first little session too, I believe. Mm-hmm. This is the history form. So the student's name will be up here. And then of course, if they had a folder the previous year, it would have listed already the information from last year or from previous years. It has a place for the school year, the school year, so you're gonna list that. And I'll just give you the examples here. It says school year 18-19, grade first. The teacher is Mrs. Earnhardt. And then it says first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. For first quarter, and the student you may have noticed is Chuck LaRusso. So for first quarter, it says reading tier 2. And then for second quarter, reading tier 3. And it looks like we've just gotten through second quarter here. So that's the history form. That's important to have. Tier 1 paperwork. This is what your whole grade level, you sit down together and you can create this. And basically what that is it has a place for you to kind of, as a grade level, just record your overall data for each area. So for example, this one says reading, and it has a place where you describe the facts, interpret the data, and then application to classroom practice. So we just did kind of an example here, and it says first graders are expected to have a goal of 58 nonsense words at the end of the year. Middle of year benchmark should be 43 nonsense words, and beginning of year expectation is 27 nonsense words. Now that's a little flipped around. We could have probably written that the opposite way, but that has information about how many nonsense words should be read at each point during the school year. And then we have that 67% of first graders are meeting this expectation at the beginning of the year. So that's overall data for your whole grade level. Interpret the data. Students need to have a firm understanding of phonemic awareness in order to be proficient in this area. And then application to classroom practice. We just listed some different interventions there, or programs. Letterland, small group fluency drills, EI target groups, and Hill Rap participants. Those are some examples there of different programs. Okay, so that was tier 1. Moving right along. Now we're going to go to hearing and vision. Hearing and vision are super important, of course. And let's see, here we have vision first. So this is the vision form, and you can get one of these in the office workroom. In the nurses, there's a little box in the office workroom where you can get one of these for the nurse. I do believe it's online. Does she have an online form now too?
I haven't seen it online, but it is right. There's plenty of copies right underneath your mailboxes.
Yes. And so if you have a student in the process, it's always good to have a current vision screening. So you can fill this out. Nurse Ashley is super helpful, so you can ask Nurse Ashley for help with this, and you'll just fill out the top. So for example, we have here that the date's October 7th, 2018. The school is Rocky River. The student is Chuck LaRusso. Ms. Earnhardt's the teacher. The grade level's first. Is this child EC? No. And then the reason for referral is MTSS. Comments, put any comments there. This says wears glasses. And then Nurse Ashley will pull that student when she can and do vision, and then she'll give you this back for your documentation.
It's important to have this done if you are first or third grade as well, because the mass screening is not a complete look at both here far and nearsighted. It only does one. So if you would please make sure that if you are starting an MTSS folder, make sure that you still have the vision completed.
Thank you. So that's vision. Now we're going to move on to hearing. Hearing it's important to make sure that that's okay as well. So there is a hearing screening as well. You can find it in the same area as the vision one. It's down in one of those boxes under the mailboxes. This, for hearing, you will ask Mrs. Milholland to help you with that, to do a screening. So you'll fill this out and put it in Mrs. Milholland's mailbox. And then it does have a place where you'll fill out the student information, and then you'll mark MTSS for that. And Ms. Milholland will do that as soon as she can. Okay. Now,
once you get that back from Nurse Ashley and Sarah Milholland, you have a place on your checklist to say the date that the screening was completed and what the results were, so pass or fail. So this is very important for you to keep up with as well. Okay. Next
is the attendance report. So for attendance, that's important to have that information there as well. You can also print this out of PowerSchool, or of course you can ask Barb as well. So Barb can help you with that as well if you need help with getting that information. Okay. There is a social developmental history form. This form asks a lot about the student's past. For example, have they had any major medical issues in the past? Even things like when did they start walking, when did they start talking, things like that. So this form, it is front and back. It's highly encouraged. Please do send it home at when they're in Tier 2. We cannot force parents to fill this out, of course, but it is strongly recommended. So please do fill that out. That's great background information for us to have about the student. All right. So we do have a parent letter that you'll find in here as well. And this is to talk to parents about when a student goes into Tier 2 or Tier 3. To be honest with you, this is a little tricky because it does say that the parent's going to come to the meeting. At this time, really, we don't have parents come to our MTSS meetings. So if this is tricky or confusing, it's okay if you don't send this home right now. But the big important thing is please, please, please just communicate with parents about the MTSS process. But you will find this in the folder as well. There is a place on the checklist that talks about whether a student is ESL, English second language, or not. So it says that they're not or they are, and you're just going to check that. And then also right below that it has a place whether they've been retained or not. So you're going to mark that. Sometimes your folder will already have a copy of that information in it. If you know that a student is ESL or that they have been retained but there's nothing in here, there should be copies of that information in their cumulative folder. You could also always ask Adrian Olabed about ESL or about retention. Miss Earnhardt or Dr. LaRusso would most likely know where copies of that information would be. And then lastly, over here under the left side of the folder, it does say medical documentation. If the parent has given you any information about a diagnosis that the child has, a medical diagnosis, please include that or write a little note there. If they have a 504 plan, you could also include that. Because 504 plans will have medical documentation on the back of those as well. Some of our students have student health plans. If you would like to, you could always include that information as well, anything health or medical related. So that sums up the left side of the folder. Type this out. And Mrs. Earnhardt is going to talk to you in more depth about the right side of the folder.
Okay. So, for example, this student, we're going to focus on the area of reading. I'm sure you can tell that by our Tier 1 paperwork. So, for example, when I looked at, I'm the teacher and I look at my M-Class student summary, I saw that this particular student, Chuck, had read this year at BOI in many of his DIBELS components. So I took a moment and I looked back at last year's in kindergarten, which is very tricky because, again, they are just then being exposed to the curriculum. They are being exposed to school in general. So lots of times it is difficult to do an MTSS folder for a kindergartner. However, we do because, you know, we can definitely tell when we have some who are needing some extra support. So in first grade, which I am the teacher of his first grade class, I noticed that there are not just this year but last year trends in his DIBELS component where he is struggling with his phonemic awareness. So what I chose to focus on was his nonsense word fluency, so blending together these sounds. And I'm going to create his first intervention with this paperwork. So no matter if it's the first intervention or if it's the 5th intervention, if it's Tier 2 or Tier 3, I'm going to use the same paperwork. You most likely have 1 or 2 of these blank sheets, but on our Section 3, when we talk about the website, you can actually print more out, or Ms. Kubert or myself could have copies for you as well. So if you need those, let us know. But we're going to go, this is a lot of information, but if you go piece by piece, it doesn't take too long. A lot of the information up at the top is from his demographics, so for the things that you've done on the left side. This would be a Tier 2, so if you're starting it, typically we don't start all the way at Tier 3. I know there are some specific cases of Hill Rap that we went directly to Tier 3, but most in general, we're going to start with a Tier 2, which is up here on the right side. Then you have what content area. Remember we talked about how it's just more than reading and math. It could be behavior, it could be writing or other. So we need to check off which one that we're going to be focusing on. Again, this is reading. Then you just put the demographics, the student's name, the PowerSchool ID number that you probably have multiple places in your room. Again, it's also on PowerSchool. The date that you were starting this intervention is the date that you need to put on here, not the beginning of the year. You need to put your name, the grade level, and which intervention is it. So if I'm starting and creating this from scratch, this is his first intervention, so I'm going to mark 1. The middle section talks about has the student had excessive absences, tardies. It's a yes or a no. You should be able to tell that from the attendance printout from Barb, but if you're not sure, you can always look at your PowerSchool or you can ask Barb. Just a simple email. The middle section then continues to talk about current performance, where they need to be, where they are currently in the area that you are targeting. So where you are targeting. Current performance, again, I said that Chuck was having some difficulty with blending and decoding. He was really struggling with his nonsense words and in the DIBELS component. So his current performance for the BOY nonsense word fluency was 12 with a goal of 27. And again, I had shown when I dug deeper and looked at his previous year's components in this, he was still struggling in his DIBELS. So this is a trend that I'm seeing with Chuck, and I want to make sure that he gets the supports he needed. The problem statement, this is just a quick sentence as to what you think is the root problem. We don't need to talk about how he doesn't have support at home or he never does his homework. This is about the target area. So again, I said Chuck was going to be working on some blending, or he's having trouble with that. So my problem statement for Chuck is Chuck has difficulty blending and decoding sounds. That's it. Of course, he can't read, but why can't he read? This is the underlying issue. The short-term goal, so for that, I'll look at MOY. His goal would be 43. And the long-term goal for nonsense word fluency would be a goal of 58. Those I just got from my M-Class class summary. I just pulled there and looked. Some of it can be very simple like this. If it's math, it may be where you're wanting to target 2 out of 4 in the end of year benchmark. Or if you're wanting to do a separate CFA, you can do all of that. But this with M-Classes makes it a little bit easier for you. On the left side, on the bottom, this is where the develop and implement action plan occurs. This is where you're going to state the specific intervention that you're going to use to treat this problem statement that you wrote. What intervention, and it needs to be a research-based, and we'll show you where you can locate those in part 3. What are you going to do to help target this problem statement? So again, the problem statement was Chuck has difficulty blending and decoding sounds. So the research-based intervention strategy, or instructional strategy that we're going to do is this blending board card, which is a CVC whole words. This is something that we got from the Heel Wrap, and it's just really great. These are CVC words. There are about 56 pages of these. Some of them are real words and some of them are nonsense words, but here they're going to be focusing on making the sounds, running his finger, and he likes cars, so he may even get to take it and run a race car through. Again, you want to make sure that you know your students and try to pull in some of their interests to kind of help them buy in. Where is this going to take place? It's going to take place in my classroom because I'm going to do it during EI time. It's going to take place 3 times a week. You have the option of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week. Some of ours, for example, Hill Wrap with Miss Cruz or Miss Lester would be a 5 time a week. It just depends on when you do it. I know first grade you do EI 3 times a week. So if your student does that, it's just based on what the frequency is needed. Minutes per session. So how many minutes of those 3 times a week am I going to be doing this? I put 10 to 15. I think it would probably take more in the beginning of the intervention, and then once he gets used to it, I think we'll probably get closer to that 10-minute. And the responsible party, this is who is going to be doing this intervention with Chuck. Who is going to be responsible to do this blending board task with him? I put myself, TA, and parent volunteer, because I do have a parent volunteer that comes in every Thursday and helps me with my guided reading, and she also helps read with students, so I know that I can count on her. So these 3 people could be those who are going to be providing this instruction for Chuck. So this is what I'm going to be doing with him 3 times a week. It doesn't matter if it's the same 3 times a week every week. It just needs to happen 3 times a week. I need to have proof that I'm doing that, so I'll have my little checklist to show how many words he is getting correctly. But on the right side of this paper is showing, is this intervention working? And that's where we progress monitor. So that is not how many of these words he's getting correctly, because this is just the intervention. How am I testing? How am I assessing to make sure it's working? That's going to be in my M-Class progress monitoring. So I'm going to do that since he is red. I'm going to already be progress monitoring Chuck every 10 school days in the area of DIBELS and a TRC. The area that I'm going to be working on is this nonsense word fluency. If you go into your M-Class, you can print out a really nice chart that shows all the different times that you're progress monitoring, and then it maps it out where you can see if the trend line is going up, down, or if it's plateauing. So it's really great to have. If you do an M-Class where you can progress monitor through M-Class, it's really great if you will print this out and include with your materials. So right now, I have only progress monitored him twice since beginning in October, and he has scored on October 19th a 30, and on November 9th a 34. So I'm going to write that from M-Class on this side right here. When I do my kid talks and when I meet with my team, I'm going to bring Chuck up. If it's working well, I'm just going to kind of say, this is what I'm doing with Chuck. I may not bring him up every single week if he's doing well. Right now, his trend line's going up. However, if a buddy of mine or if a colleague says, I don't know what to do because he was blending words right and I just don't know what this child needs, that's when I'm going to speak up and I'm going to say, well, this is what I'm doing during for his tier 2 intervention. Maybe you would like to try it with your child too. But this is where we talk about what's working with our students and what's not. If for some reason Chuck begins to decline, that this is not working, then I'm going to bring it up in Kid Talk and say, you know, I've been doing this for 6 weeks. He was going really well, but now he's plateaued or he's even declined. And that's when a discussion is made with my colleagues about, well, maybe we need to do a different intervention. Maybe this is not as intense as it needs to be. And that's where I would talk with my team, try to find another intervention that still focuses on the problem, which is blending and decoding words or sounds, and then I would do another paperwork with another intervention for my second, and I would mark 2. Everything that I do with him, I would just put and clip together and put it over here on my right side. If, for example, you have a student who goes with Miss Cruz or goes with Miss Lester for hill wrap, or even some of our awesome SGIs that are having small groups, you can fill out the paperwork. So for example, if they are doing hill wrap with Miss Cruz or Miss Lester, that is a tier 3. And so please make sure that is marked. For example, like I said, Chuck was really struggling and then he was accepted into this hill wrap program. I'm still going to fill out this, which his Dibbles composite was a 66. I'm putting the short term, I'm putting the long term. The problem statements, he's having problems with phonemic awareness. Over here though, in this section, I'm going to say that the research-based instruction strategy is going to be hill wrap. Miss Cruz's classroom is where it's going to be taking place. This is 5 times a week for 45 minutes. The responsible party is Miss Kyla Cruz. Now when you have this with Miss Lester or Miss Cruz, once you fill this out, what's so wonderful about these 2 ladies is I'm going to give this paperwork to Miss Lester or to Miss Cruz. And then they are going to have their own data, and they have tons, more than you will ever see, that they will collect, and then they will progress monitor and put all of the information to complete it for you. So if you just do the initial part and give it to them, then they can finish and do the rest and keep you updated on how your student's doing in that hill wrap program. We talked about that already? Okay. If they are tier 3, Ms. Kubert is going to talk about some other steps that we take.
Thanks. So if you have a student that's at tier 2 and they're continuing to struggle with tier 2 interventions, and you've tried a few different interventions and they're still struggling, and you've presented them in Kid Talk and you're still just seeing a lot of struggles, we do have our MTSS problem solving teams here at school. We have one for kindergarten and first grade teachers, one for second and third grade teachers. And what I mean by that is we have a representative from each grade level that's on the MTSS problem solving team. And you can let that person know, or you can let me or Ms. Earnhardt know, or Dr. LaRusso, anyone on that MTSS team, problem solving team, that you need to come and present a student to our team. And we can definitely get you on the agenda to come talk to our team. And you would do that if you are really still concerned about this student and think that they probably need to go to tier 3, just to present them to our team to see what we can do to help them and move them along to tier 3 if we need to. So if that's the case, please let one of us know, and we will be happy to put you on the agenda to come and present that student as well. And then after that, of course, hill wrap is a tier 3 intervention. I know Ms. Earnhardt already talked about that. That doesn't mean that you have to bring every single hill wrap student to our problem solving team. But if you do have a student to present, please let one of us know. Also at tier 3, the tier 3 paperwork is set up the same as tier 2. The only difference is, if you can see this, is for tier 3 you would just mark it right here, but this is all the same paperwork for tier 2 and tier 3, so you would just mark that if a student's in tier 3. If they are in tier 3, it is recommended that they have an observation done of them, at least one to begin with. If you need to have an observation of a tier 3 student done, you are welcome to come ask me or shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to schedule that and come in and do an observation and get that to you as well. In some cases, I do 2 observations. But please let me know if you have a student that needs an observation. I'll be happy to come and do that and get that to you. That would only need to be done for students that are in Tier 3, not in Tier 2, just Tier 3. So I think that pretty much sums up how to create a folder.
Yeah.
Please do remember that we're always here to support you. Anybody on the problem solving team, we're here to support you. We have a school psychologist that can help. Tracy Lawson, Kyla Cruz is great at helping. In our next part 3, we're going to talk more about how to access information about different interventions. So we will talk about that in our next session. Thank you.
This is part 3, where we will talk about our Rocky River staff site and highlight our MTSS tab, where there's lots of online information to help you with your MTSS folders and interventions. This is our Rocky River staff site, which you should already have bookmarked. If you don't, the link is up here at the top. And over on the left, you can go and navigate down to MTSS and click there. And this is our MTSS site for Rocky River, which we will go over now. Up here in the green, you can see the link to the district website. This takes us to Mooresville Graded site and has lots of information. This is the K6, which is created by Ms. Connolly and the EC department. If we go back, this is the MTSS summary for parents. We talked about this and showed it when we spoke about when you have your conference for Tier 2. This is a front and a back sheet to help parents kind of understand what multiple tiered system of support is. This is, again, when you would give this to them when you meet to discuss the child going into Tier 2. The third thing is the parent brochure. This is not in your red folder, but we do have multiple copies of this up in the office for parents to look at. You can print this out or you can get yourself a copy, or just let me know and I can get that for you as well. It does say the same thing as the parent summary.
Now we're going to scroll down a little bit here, and some of this will be a little bit repetitive with what we talked about in our second session, our second video, but this just goes over what to do if you need to start Tier 2 with a student, and these are specific steps to follow. The first one talks about just looking over data points, various data points, and then about getting a red folder. You can always ask me, Mrs. Kubert, or Mrs. Earnhardt for a red folder, and they are also located again in the workrooms, and all of that blank paperwork will be in those folders in your workrooms. And please ask for assistance with that if you need it. The second thing there talks about contacting parents to inform them about interventions that you're doing, which, as we've talked about earlier, is a huge thing, just that communication with parents about the process. There are different letters, again, that you can send home, and we did talk about these in the second session as well. So there are some letters there that you can send home to parents. The third point there is about completing hearing and vision, which is very, very, very important. And the fourth bullet there talks about beginning research-based interventions and documenting progress. And then we are always available to help with that as well. Number 5 there talks about updating your grade level teams about how students are doing during kid talks. That's also a great time to sign an initial paperwork at the bottom of the tiered intervention sheets. Number 6 there talks about continuing the intervention if it's successful. If it's not successful, it's important to develop a new intervention and try that intervention. Typically, interventions run for about 4 to 6 weeks. That's kind of the typical time frame. Number 7 says if a second intervention is successful, then continue that. If not, you can let me know. or Mrs. Earnhardt, and we can definitely schedule a time for you to present to the MTSS problem solving team. And there is a planning sheet to help assist you with that if you need to come talk to the problem solving team. And that sheet is right here, the planning sheet. And you're going to make a copy of that. And then you can use that copy to put some specific information in about the student. A lot of that is just the student's name, the teacher, the date of the presentation, vision, hearing, social developmental, has the parent been notified? And then there's also a place for you to list the problem area, their current performance in different areas, the interventions that you're using, progress monitoring data. Also, there's a little part there for behavior and if there needs to be any notes put in there about the team determination. So that's the MTSS planning sheet if you're coming to present a student to the problem solving team, to present them to move into tier 3 if they're not already in tier 3 through HEAL-RAP. Now Mrs. Earnhardt is going to talk to you about our intervention matrix for the district, as well as some other places where you can find some various interventions.
So one of the most important things of your interventions is always to be research-based, and we hear that all the time with MTSS. This is a location right here in this section where you can go and find, truthfully, just about any intervention that you can think of. This is mainly for literacy, math, and behavior. This one at the top, if you click it, it is a little bit overwhelming whenever you look at it, but it's very, very informative. This is about behavior. The yellow is tier 2. If you go over to the red, it is tier 3. You can look down here at the bottom. We also have some literacy, tier 2 and tier 3, where we start off with phonological and phonemic awareness issues. Gives you kind of like the location, a little bit of background about what the actual intervention looks like, what you're going to be doing, and some data that you could collect through that. This is reading A to Z, where you could go. Any trained personnel can do this. It just really kind of lays it out for you if you're having some difficulty locating some interventions for a specific skill. At the bottom, if you keep scrolling, you'll see that it does go up to 9th grade, which we just will focus on ours. Here in K3, there is an attendance matrix and a behavior matrix that goes along with the literacy. The next one is strictly for literacy interventions, and this has been added to for the past couple of years. It goes from phonics to fluency to comprehension, all the way down to writing. And if you guys have seen this before, many of you have, this is a really helpful tool to use after we've completed our DIBELS assessment, because as you guys know, when you look at your M-Class DIBELS summary, if you start at the top and you work your way down, that's where we see the area of need. So if we look for the hierarchy of skills. So if they have a red or a yellow up at the top, we need to focus on that before you get to something lower like door fluency or days. So this tells you that if there is like first sound fluency or phoneme segmentation issues, then maybe something we need to find in an intervention could be blends and segment phonemes, or possibly rhyming. This is a really great tool. I use this as a teacher as well. So, just letting you know that it's still there. Once you find the area that you need to work on, these are some that have been tried and true. Today in part 2, I talked about how there was a child that I was doing a tier 2 paperwork for with some issues with blending and decoding words, and I used the blending board cards. Those are right here. What you can do, if that's something that you feel that your child needs, then you could just go and print it out. And remember, I told you there was multiple pages, and there are. It's over 100. Some of these that are listed come from FCRR. Again, that's Florida Center for Reading Research, and that is a research-based intervention. If you click on it though, you will need to know that most of these have multiple interventions within. So you can scroll down and see something that maybe might interest your student to try to pique their interest. So that is there for you. You can always just go straight to the site, FCRR, and type in their search engine. But these are just some that I personally have used and teachers have used during our Kid Talks that we know work really, really well. The next section is for math. We have two separate math interventions. We have been adding to this one. It's very similar in color to the one for literacy. You can see that we have some one-to-one correspondence. We have some application strategies. So word problems seem sometimes to trick up kids, especially if they have that reading difficulty as well for literacy. We have also included some more math interventions from our central office. And here's kind of flip-flopped, but if you look, yellow would be your tier 2 and red would be for your tier 3. And what I like about this one, it's based on the domains. So you can see that over there are just some of the larger skills. Behavior interventions, we have 2 flow charts that I'm going to show you in just a minute. But here are some. Check in and check out is one of our first ones that we always try to use. Some kind of behavior chart as well. So here are some samples, student schedules, questionnaires. Sometimes we'll even do the student interest survey to see what maybe they would like to work for. If you have a student that you are going to begin an MTSS process with for behavior, you probably will want to walk through your paperwork with myself or Miss Hubert, and we'd be happy to do that. These 2 flow charts right here help with that process.
Great, thank you. And we do have our problem-solving teams, MTSS problem-solving teams, which we spoke about in the second video session. And the representatives from each grade level are listed right here. For kindergarten, it's Miss Lanning, first grade, Miss Cottle, second grade, Miss Kinsey, and then third grade is Miss Banner. And then we also do have listed our MTSS leadership team right below that as well. Each grade level also has a team member on the leadership team. And then down below there are some more MTSS forms listed there. We talked about all of these in the second session when we went through all of the forms. I did want to mention that there are MTSS notebooks in each workroom, and the notebooks all have extra copies of each one of these each of these paperwork. These forms, yes. So in your notebooks in your hallways, you will find extra forms for all of those.
And the last part of our website talks about Kid Talks and what are they. You guys know that we do have one day a week that we kind of section off for you guys to get together, because in the past you just didn't have a lot of time to talk about your kids and do some MTSS paperwork. Which can get overwhelming at times. So that's one reason why last year we put this in place. So Kid Talks, it would be really great if you have something like a digital word data wall like we have here. I know many grade levels do this. It's a great way to kind of visualize and track your students. Kid Talks are a time to talk about students who you are seeing falling through some cracks. It could be in one area or it could be in multiple areas. It's a time that you can share the interventions that you are using to see, like we talked about in part 2, hey, this has been working for me and my student. I've really been seeing a lot of progress. Or it could be the opposite. I've been doing this intervention for 4 weeks and he has plateaued or he has not improved. What is something that I can do? So this is a time where you talk about students. It's also a great time, those of you who do group by pods, or I know first grade does this for EI time. It's a really great time to see if your target zones are being are more specific to what they need, to make sure students are grouped to where they need to be, because all of these groups can be very fluid and change often. So this is a section that talks a little bit about Kid Talk, and this is an example of a data wall that you have. And this is a digital data wall just so we can maintain confidentiality a little bit there. But this is a really great site. There's lots of things on it. Again, and we can't stress this enough, if you have any questions whatsoever, please make sure that you ask your representatives, and always we're available up in the office. Another great thing is we have work sessions. We've already had one this year in the Media Center, so be on the lookout for those. We'll have another one in January, but we'll have those multiple times throughout the year, no matter what school year it is, so that you can come and work or get some advice on your MTSS folders. Thank you.
Thank you.